And what happens is the discs absorb water. Like for example, when you wake up in the morning, you're taller than you're going to be when the day is over. Because what happens is as you're laying down, the discs reabsorb water, and then gravity gradually compresses it out. And then as you get more mileage on your bones, the ability for that water to get reabsorbed decreases, so discs tend to shrink over time. All right, now we're talking. So if you have the curve of lordosis serves a purpose. So if my neck was straight and I go like this to absorb shock, is there going to be very much give to it? No. If you have a curve like this, that inherently gives it some shock absorption ability. All right, now we move into the contractile tissues. What's the main muscles that extend the spine? Rectus spinae. In the neck, you have a couple more that are added into that. You have the splenius and what's the other one? Semispinalis. But basically, the ones on the back of the spine extend the spine. The ones on the front flex the spine. And then the scalenes, those are going to be important. Those are basically accessory respiratory muscles. But they go from the neck and they go into the ribs and then there's the neurovascular bundle that goes through there. Basically, they're part of the borders of the thoracic outlet. And we'll talk more about that. And then, of course, we have the SCM. And you have the semispinalis cervicus. So if you talk about spinalis, that goes from SP to SP. Semispinalis goes from TP or lamina to the SP. We're not going to get into too much of the origin insertion of muscles in here, except for when it's clinically significant. We'll talk about the scalenes. So again, this is just listing the muscles. I'm going to kind of go through this a little quick so we'll have more time here. Now the spinal cord, basically it's going to be, in a general sense, it's thicker at the top and tapers as it goes down. However, where are the two main areas where you have more of the nerves coming off of the spine? Wouldn't that be here for the brachial plexus? So you have an enlargement in this area here for the brachial plexus, and then where would be the next place where there'd be an enlargement? Going down the legs, right? So you have the lumbar and the lumbosacral plexus. And so basically those are nerves that the spinal cord gives off the nerve roots that become the peripheral nerves. So you have C1 to C1, including C8, so if we're talking about the cervical nerve roots. And then you have the cervical plexus, like I said before, it's C1 to C5, maybe C4, and then the brachial plexus is either C4 or C5 to T1. And then again, like I say, that brachial plexus passes through the thoracic outlet. And I mean, this part's on the slide, but I don't think it's in your notes. But basically, you understand, like I said, you have dermatomes of C1 to T1, but the more important ones are going to be C5 to T1. And depending on what types of charts you look at, there's little bits of variations of dermatomes. This one here is pretty good because what it does is it has little dots. So say if you're going to pick one area to isolate that specific dermatome. And this one, I believe I have on the secure site. Okay, so like I said, those you need to know your dermatomes and myotomes. And then as far as vascular tissue, we've got the vertebral artery. That's the only place in the spine where the artery goes through an actual foramen in the vertebra itself. And then we also have the subclavian artery and vein that's part of the thoracic outlet. So here you can see between the scalene, the anterior scalene and the posterior medius, that's the thoracic outlet right there. Right. And the subclavian artery goes into the thoracic outlet starting at the scalene triangle, but the vein doesn't come into it until it goes under the clavicle. Clavicle will be right here. So then, in some situations, we'll talk about mixed tissue, where it's not only contractile or inert or thoracic. In this case, it's mixed structure. So the thoracic outlet has mixed tissues in it. It has nerve tissue, and it also has vascular tissue. Okay, so then it passes through the scalenes, then it goes under the clavicle, and then anterior and superior to the first rib. Okay, I think I fixed that in the notes. What does it say in the notes? It should say anterior and superior to the rib, because you can't be anterior and posterior to the same thing.
Between clavicle and first rib?
Yeah, it just says between clavicle and first rib. So basically, the thoracic outlet is the brachial plexus and the subclavian artery and vein that supply the upper extremity. And then, what are the types of things that can affect the thoracic outlet? So one of them is going to be the cervical rib. Yeah, right here. So normally C7 doesn't have any rib attached to it. You can have an abnormal variation where you have a cervical rib. So that's going to be bony tissue that can put pressure on the thoracic outlet. You can have one side or both sides. And then here we have the actual scalene triangle. So you have this anterior scalene, and then the posterior and the middle scalene. And then this is where the brachial plexus and the subclavian artery come out. So it's right there. So you can have constriction of the thoracic outlet at that point, where you may have fibrosis of the muscle. So basically what we're doing is we're taking the thoracic outlet, which is, it's like a big long hallway. Well, it's not that big, but consider it a certain tunnel. And then at the upper border you have the scalenes, and then as it progresses there's another space where it can get constricted, which is a subclavicular space. So subclavicular would mean under the clavicle. So that's basically the space between the clavicle and the first rib. So conditions where thoracic outlet can be caused by somebody carrying heavy books or bags or something like that, so you're pulling it down. So here first you have the scalene, and that's going to, like when we do tests for the scalene, it's going to have to do with rotating the head. So we'll do tests where you turn this way or turn that way. It's going to constrict the vessels in the neck. Then if we do things like this, that's going to do affecting more of the subclavicular space. And then as it continues farther down, there's a space here where you have the coracoid process and the pec minor. So basically we're talking about, you can have problems here, you can have problems here, then you can get problems down in this area here. And so that pec minor stuff is going to be stuff where we put the arms up like this. Okay, because you're stretching that pec minor onto the coracoid process. So again, it comes down to knowing the anatomy and what structures are going to be irritated and where they are. And then that has to do with what kind of special tests we're going to do. We'll do some like this, some will involve pulling the arm back, some will involve coming up like this.